So, speaking of things that can be shut down, we might move on to tonight's presentation. During COVID, I ended up inadvertently falling into the pool of people that were mentors last year, and then through my volunteer engagement role, I've been dragged upwards into the team that have classed as organisers for Joomla's Summer of Code project. So at the moment, that's the nature of the team has changed greatly in the last 12 months, and probably even the last 12 weeks, in fact. Previously, it happened to be Benjamin Trenkle, who had been part of the Joomla 4 release team. Phil Walton, who did Bugs and Fun at Home with me last year. Benjamin also organised the 2020 Pizza Bugs and Fun, actually both of them. And then this year, I should get his name up. So just looking up. Here it is there. Shivam Rajput in India has taken on the role of team leader, and then we've also got myself and Christian Meyerstatter in Germany, who's part of the accessibility team. But what's happened in the last couple of months is now Benjamin has become the production department coordinator, and Phil last week or 2 weeks ago was elected as the outreach department coordinator. So we've suddenly got 2 members of the board for open source matters as part of the coordination team, and it's bringing a very new lifted insight into this year's Google Summer of Code. So the students at the moment have got 9 hours and 40 minutes to finish their proposals and submit them today. And once that's all done, we'll then be on our way to going through the process of selecting them. So when I was looking this afternoon, there's actually been 400 students from around the world have been interested or expressed an interest in participating. But what's actually done is going to leave us with a lot of proposals. But about 100 proposals have been submitted when I was looking late last night and this morning, and they are a mixed bag. Unfortunately, the way that GSOC works is that you get the cream of the crop will be the ones that will probably be selected. So even though we've got 400 students interested, we might get 150 proposals. I think it was 130 last year. That 150 proposals potentially has as many as 60% spam and rubbish, and then the other 40% are a mixture of proposals that we've got to consider but might not be up to the quality that we're after. And then usually there's 2 or 3 proposals that just leap out as being well above all of the other projects. So we're hoping to find a few of those. And for the project that I'm working on this year, we've currently got 2 and possibly 4 that we're expecting that are going to be much better than what we had before. Much better than the rest that we're looking through at the moment. So it's going to be exciting there. In the chat tonight, I've put in a couple of sets of links. So I'll share a few of these pages on the screen as we go forward. Share screen. Stuart, can you enable screen sharing, please? Or make me a co-host. Thank you. Okay, so Google Summer of Code is designed to make a bring people into open source projects to introduce them to open source. So it's designed more for new contributors and beginner contributors. And that's one of the problems that we keep on encountering, is that the newer you are to not just open source, but a lot of the concepts around how to create open source code, sometimes the harder it is. So we did have a flurry of new entries coming in only in the last week and a half. And so those students have basically tried to get up to speed, and application. So the onboarding process has been open since the start of March. So students have nearly had 2 months to communicate and find out more about Joomla, and get more familiar with setting up a test environment and local development environment. And a lot of them have had problems along the way with that. The ones that have only jumped on board in the past 5 to 10 days have had a lot more trouble with that. And that's something that for next year we'll be trying to encourage more. The way that we've collected information this year means that we've now got a database of 400 to start the process next year earlier. And so we can contact them in January to say, here's the things you should be doing now to find out more about Joomla and get yourself established, and get contributing, and find out how things need to be done in the project. So Google will sponsor the whole program. There's 18,000 students across 112 countries, 40 million lines of code, 746 organisations, and 17,000 mentors, and it's been running for 17 years. And Joomla has participated, so if this is the 17th year this year, Joomla's participated in 15 of those 17 years. And in the chat of the call tonight, I've listed all of the different previous years' projects links. And if you go through some of the history there, you'll see that there's a lot of various projects that you might not know some of them. I'm just looking at that list there. I can't put my finger on the handful there, but there had been one that I did see. The accessible administrator templates for Joomla 1.5. The entire content versioning system was originally a set of GSOC projects, and they've got enhanced over a few years, things like that. So there's a lot of things that we've got in Joomla that are actually part previously, well, the history of them is to work with Joomla going forward. So sorry, one sec. So this year what we've done, or Google changed a number of parameters this year. So they've been tightening guidelines and rebuilding it, and changing a few different things for mentor organisations to participate. And one of the big things they did was half the amount of time that students have to complete projects, which is going to be interesting in that it's basically half the size of the hours that they can contribute, which in turn possibly has reduced the complexity of some of the projects that we're able to offer. But this year we've still got 5 projects for Joomla, and they vary from, I think there's 2 large projects and 3 medium projects. So those students that are eventually selected for the large projects will be doing 350 hours worth of work, and the medium projects are 175 hours worth of work. So I'll leave you to find out more about the history of Google Summer of Code yourself. And if you do find any exciting bits of factoids, particularly about Joomla's participation, send them through to me, and we'll be updating the documentation for next year with a few more pieces of information that we've been finding during this year's sessions. So now onto the project. So has anyone yet used Joomla Workflow, which came out with Joomla 4. And then has anyone taken a look at the Joomla Scheduling plugin, which came out in Joomla 4.1 a couple of months ago? Nope. Okay. All right. So we've done previous sessions on Workflow where what that can do is allow you to set up transition stages for your content, and then as you edit the content, you can move it through editorial stages that you might have for a larger organisation, and allocate the tasks through to different people. The task scheduler was built as part of the Summer of Open Source projects last year, and what that task scheduler is going to do is they called it a poor man's cron job initially, but the guy that built the project last year took it in a completely much more diverse direction, and so now what you can actually set up is a series of plugins and triggers to schedule almost anything in Joomla, and then either have it so that you've got a cron job that's firing the cron timetable script to trigger all the scheduled items, or you can just have it so that certain things fire only when certain criteria have been met, with how long it's been since someone last visited the site, and or how long it's been since the last time that item had been triggered. Putting the two together with this project for this year's Summer of Code is going to make, ideally, a really powerful ability for Joomla to have very detailed workflows set up with granular tasks that are automatically triggered. So as the potential's there that you could start your workflow when you start writing the article, but once you get to the point where you've actually published you could then use the scheduler to automatically fire in a month's time to change the status of that article from featured back to a non-featured article. You could have it so that it automatically fired social media publishing plugins, so that then a month after your article is initially published, it might then be pushed out to another social media platform as a secondary post or something like that. So it's up to the students quite often as to how the project then gets driven, but that is the basics of the project scope there, is that if they build it correctly, you'll have a component to manage it, and a plug-in language for scheduling. So there's already a plug-in. There's a plug-in framework for the workflow, and there's a plug-in framework for the scheduler, and so then you'll end up with a crossover plug-in type that will trigger at either end to do whatever it is you want there. So does anyone have any questions on that one, or thoughts on another example that I can push out somewhere else?
You could do all sorts of smart things with that workflow to perhaps push it into you have a premium subscription versus an also ran subscription. So you get a month, it sits in premium, and then it might move into another sort of level, sort of more general purpose, where it's not so time critical.
Yeah, okay. So you could take it away from the paywall that premium subscribers have for a month exclusive access or something like that. So, yep. Cool. All right, so project 2 is the guided tour project, which is a reworking of the Summer of Open Source project that was going through last year. The limitation of the program's dictates sort of how many hours the student has available. And then in the mix of things over the last 2 years, everything's been belted obviously by COVID and changes to face-to-face learning and all sorts of different things with the students. So it also comes down to the quality of the student. That when we're selecting the proposals, we've basically got their proposal and links that they provide us with to try and determine whether they know what it is that they're talking about and whether they can prove that from their programming experience and things like that. So it's less that there's quite a red flags, but they might be very good at a particular thing, or they've been taught to do something in a particular way at university. But when it comes to then trying to take that knowledge and merge it with a new JavaScript library and minimal understanding of the Joomla framework, you end up with roadblocks along the way. So with Guided Tour last year, Justin was the student at the time. He's become the mentor, one of the mentors for Guided Tour this year. And he got it to a point where the basic concepts were all in place, but the actual Joomla side of the execution had some flaws. So you could end up with a on the page tour, but not a multi-page tour and things like that. So so if you have a look, there's a JavaScript library called Shepherd JS, which is basically uses its library and another library called Popper to create a tour. So if you ever log into a website and it starts taking you on a tour and has step-by-step around the screen, there's a high probability that if it's PHP based and JavaScript based, it's using Shepherd, and their website is quite comprehensive as to the demo that it gives. So now with this year's project, we're now going to have some students working on it again to then take out the final bugs that he had in last year's version, or they might choose to start a whole version again. The part that I'm excited about with this is less once we've got the working version, that's all well and good, but once we get past that is the ways that it can benefit users. So we'll be shipping Joomla 4.2 with the guided tour, or whichever version the guided tour is ready for, with some basic tours around how to use Joomla, and then how to use specific system components that are targeted more at the super user or the new super user level. And they'll probably end up being that there'll be a tour for all of these projects if that becomes available. We're also going to end up with a framework for third-party extension developers, so they'll know that this is built into Joomla 4, and then they can then have a way to create the tour and just put in the tour as part of their installation. So the first time you go to use OS membership, then it might take you on a quick tour and tell you what to set up and where all the settings are and things like that. So the real part that I'm particularly excited about is that there'll be the ability for you to create your own end user tours. So if you have something that you want to show your clients how to do something, you could set up a tour that specifically walks them through all of the parts that they need to do when they're creating a content item, and then if they forget something, they can do the tour again and it'll show them the part that's missing there.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's great.
Yeah, and then on the front end, it should also be possible for you to create a tour for new members of your site. So if they happen to have signed up through OS membership, the first time they log in, it can take them on a tour of what the features are and have that all built in. So at the moment, the plan is to get a working version 1 prototype in, and then from there, hopefully we'll work more from there. The 2 or 3 students that we're looking at closely on this one, 2 of them have quite a layer of experience over the last 18 months in what they've been doing. So hopefully one of those is the successful candidate there. Right, project 3 is a SEO project. So Joomla's SEO capabilities have been built in from day one. So when you go and edit when you edit a site in your global configuration, you've got your global meta description and keywords. When you go and edit an article, you've got your global your article specific meta description and keywords. Same for categories and content, and most third-party extensions have that built in somewhere in the setup. We don't find, I haven't used a third-party SEO manager component for nearly 8 years now, and I know that there's still some things that need to be done, and that's where this project comes in a little bit. So the student that gets to do this project will be going through the current Joomla SEO structure, and then also looking at other beneficial SEO fields that can be added in, or ways to make that happen so that it's a seamless process. So the initial ones that I've seen in discussions are to look at adding open graph fields and some more schema fields so that you've got all of the basics filled out. Sorry, you can fill out as much as you want for your article, and you will know that that's going to pull it all into the right place, potentially without a third-party plugin being needed along the way. So if there's the students as part of the project have to write a magazine article during the course of their period and things like that. So I'll keep an eye out for when they're coming out and distribute them so that people can see if they're asking for feedback on sort of what other features there. But if you know of something specific there, feel free to send it through and I can pass it on to Chris, Philip and Siobhan there. I don't know whether anyone's used the accessibility plugin that's been built or that's been implemented in Joomla. So there's an accessibility plugin that is based on a particular library. I can't remember the name of it now. And it creates a whole heap of other accessibility tools that trigger different things. The accessibility project is going to fork the existing one and then rewrite many parts of the functionality, because over the last 18 months the Joomla 4 accessibility structure has continued to improve, and there's some things that now that plugin's out of date for, but other things that have been implemented. So in Joomla 4.1 the accessibility checker plugin was installed, and so now you can actually run a check against your content to make sure that it's accessible before you publish it. And so they're working on tidying that one up. That one's one of the simpler projects there. And then the fifth one at the moment is a improvement to how schema.org microdata for rich snippets is added into the site. So at the moment there's a generic set that's built into particular parts of the layout frameworks, and at the moment to change it you need to do a template override or another code override or use another plugin to do it. But what they're looking at here is to implement a JSON LD implementation, which will then have a way to configure it for every part that it's been used on. So if you want specific rich snippet data, so if you want to turn your articles into a more detailed product review or a movie review or something like that, there's whole sections of schema.org where ratings and reviews are certain types of fields, and so you'd be able to add custom fields to your articles and then assign those to being rich snippets using this plugin environment to get that all put together. So So yeah, that's a very brief overview of what we're expecting for coming into Joomla 4.2 at the start of next year, should all of the students get their projects to work correctly. So yeah.
What's the recent success rate on the projects?
I think we're running about 75% of recent ones.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so the or at least they'll get to the point. I don't think Joomla's actually failed a student in the last few years, but there's a difference between the project failing and the project not being implemented. If that makes sense. So several projects. So where the guided tour, the student passed last year based on the code or the summer of code
Criteria. Yeah, right.
but the project itself needed more
Polish.
work to polish it up and get it over the line. So yeah, and that's one of the handy things in having Benjamin as one of the coordinators is that it's a straight line through to the development team and the release cycle for Joomla, and so they're able to go and put in straight away all of the. So he's probably the harshest mentor. So, and in fact, that's how I ended up on the guided tour, was that his German sensibilities weren't getting through to the young Indian student last year, and they ended up pulling me in to, even though speak of one of the devils in the earpiece. It's just hard to manage it. So Phil Walters just appeared, morning Phil, from London. So
good morning. I don't know if I'm muted or not. Can you hear me?
No, we can hear you. Yep. So
okay. No, I've been here all the time. I've been listening.
Oh, there we go.
I put earlier on when you said that you were gently brought into the team, I put you were pushed.
That's the Australianism for it. So
yeah, no, quite right. It's that there's a big difference between passing a GSOC project and becoming part of an international piece of software. So yeah. you can pass, but not necessarily be good enough or fully round enough to be part of Joomla.
Yeah. Have I hit the money on most of the overview?
Yeah, really good. Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
I'll come back and recycle the video later for another presentation, but yeah, it's been interesting because Phil and I have both been part of this team. So the team that's running GSOC now is actually renamed the Joomla Enhancement team or Enhancement project team. So the plan there is that we're not just concentrating on GSOC, which past groups have done. So we end up with less of a churn of people because we've got several projects running throughout the year. So the Summer of Open Source was actually sponsored by the Chinese Ministry for Computing or something last year. Information technology.
That's what Tushar was part of. He wasn't. Everybody thinks he was GSOC, but he wasn't. He was some code.
And then in the next month or two, I'll be starting the conversation again with the organisers of DigitalOcean's Hacktoberfest to work out a better way that we can leverage that, where there's thousands of people around the world that are all into hacking groups like Major League Hacking and run local hackathons, where if we can get a concentrated focused effort there, we might be able to get thousands of users to do everything from simple things like translation to more comprehensive things like documentation, right through to helping finish some of these projects off and doing more debugging in Joomla. So yeah, so if you're interested in participating in that, let me know, and that'll come up in. Well, yeah, it actually runs for all of October. So yeah. So is there anybody with any feedback as to whether those, can you see benefits to some or all of those projects for how you do things?
Yeah, definitely the first one, the workflow and task scheduler integration, even though I've not used either of them, but I have clients for whom they will be very useful. Yeah.
I think the guided tours are a good idea, but it just depends how they're implemented. So another product that I have dealt with over the years decided to do some guided tours, and they implemented it in Flash, which
It's all text-based.
didn't stack up. So they just got it ready, and Flash was then deemed to be not a good thing. So they had to rip it all out again. But
Yes. The one that the library for the guided tour is all designed to be JavaScript and content based. So it's very cleanly delivered and styled. So all of your steps are just using a class, and it points. You can set the arrow to each direction, and then or set the arrow to the center, and it will just put the box in the center of the screen. So yeah,
Is there an admin interface for the?
Yeah, so it's a component.
That's the idea for the GSOC thing, is it?
Yeah. So the improvement for GSOC is to get the whole thing working more seamlessly.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, there's about 20 issues I think we created in last year's project to tidy up where sort of little things weren't quite working properly. And that's the first thing the new student will have to encounter. But probably the biggest headache that was causing a problem was that there's several ways for it to handle multi-page options. So, but what you've got to do is say, okay, well, here's the first page that this page might have 5 steps on it, and then the second page might have 3 more steps on it, and then you've got to either go to another page or you've got to go back. So if you were doing a tour on how to create an article, you'd start on the article list and then say click here to make a new article, and then take you through all the steps you needed to do on creating the article, and then would take you back to tell you what to do on the final page, back as the article list. And so that part I think is going to take a few conversations with whoever the successful student is, because already I'm seeing that's a bit to and fro in their proposals at the moment as to how to clarify that. But
guided tours is an interesting one because it's actually one of the main people it's designed for is extension developers. It has to be written in such a way that extension developers can take it on. And so it should really lighten the burden for them doing their how-to guides and everything. And it means that we then get a standard that if everybody's using the guided tour, you get to know how Joomla works. Oh, that's the Joomla one, or that's the Akiba one, or whatever. So it should be really nice like that. I'm working on the SEO project, and that, for me, I have lots of clients who do blogs or they do content, but they forget to do bits. And I think it's not going to be revolutionary in transforming in some respects, but what it should do is make sure people don't forget, automatically fill some of the stuff, and bring up the SEO score and the accessibility score as well, for Joomla in the Lighthouse score. So that's all beneficial because people will then hopefully get ranked higher. So it's little things like that. And it's also across the board. Any content you put on, you want as good a score as possible for search engine optimization. So why not put it in there?
one of the challenges with the guided tour is that every time there's a feature change, or a new filter or some other thing, if the guided tour is an online guided tour where the documentation is held sort of off system, it can get out of sync with the current version. So it's going to have to be quite smart in interpreting what current version the user is working with of any particular module.
Yeah, and that's a challenge for the student. There's to get to the point where you've got super users being able to create their own tours. There should end up being an import-export feature, and part of that is also designing the framework for third-party developers to be able to just inject a JSON string in as part of their data when they install a component, so that you end up with the right parameters all set up for their tour. So yeah, the fact that a tour is a snapshot in time is going to be something that really needs to be looked at, and how to fix that up. And I'll add that to the spec, or to the discussion points for the student. Because you wouldn't want them to need to, I don't know, because we don't tend to update data in the database when you update Joomla, do we, Phil?
So again, you don't want it to.
Well, no. So if a tour got changed, the tour wouldn't be. So if you had a tour installed in 4.2, but there was a feature change that changed the tour for 4.3, when you upgrade to 4.3, the tour would be the 4.2 tour data.
Yes. Yeah.
You wouldn't typically update Joomla core data.
No.
No.
That's the same with help screens or anything like that. You've got to go and change them.
Yeah. And that's another thing to consider with some of these, is whether whether it needs to be a core component, or whether it can be a Joomla managed extension like web links, or the extension installer in some cases, where if you want guided tour, then you can go and install the guided tour as an optional extra. But certainly the ability for that to be easily turned off would be a key thing there. I see there's a discussion going on GitHub at the moment about turning off WebAuthn device authentication as a default option as well, which if nobody, if you're not using that type of authentication, then you know that you can turn it off. You might have gone and turned it off already to stop confusion for your customer, but in some cases that's still sitting there.
It's easy to click on the wrong one, certainly in 4.0.
It is, yeah. So.
I've done it twice, and hang on, I haven't got that set up. What do you want about?
And I think I've now got it off in my skeleton build, so start rolling that out again soon. So yeah. All right. Anybody got?
Yeah, I was just going to say the workflow scheduler, that's going to be good if they can combine it, but it's going to add quite a degree of complexity to both of those sort of individual components.
Potentially. I think.
Like I can understand wanting to set up triggers and call other workflow steps, but I'm just wondering about the benefits of actually combining them into one sort of unit.
I know that creation of workflow plugins was certainly one of the parts that was leading to this. Phil, have you got
think it's about automating some of the triggering of the workflows.
Because at the moment, the only way, well, out of the box in Joomla 4, the only way you could transition from stage to stage was when you went in and edited the article or whatever had the workflow applied to it, to then move it through to the next stage. So even in workflow, there's it's not a critical issue, but there's a significant headache where the options to assign a stage to where you assign the transition to a stage, you can pick all the transitions, or you can pick individual single transitions. You can't multi-select like you can with tags. So it might be at the moment you might have trash and archive available on every transition, so you can quickly get rid of stages. But for other ones, the way that my test workflows were set up was that I had to go through 8 steps to get the article published, when if this other mechanism was in place, I could jump over all the other editorial steps and, as a super user, go straight to publishing and have that affect all the other transitions. So I think that adding in the scheduler is likely to impact that as another sub-feature there, so that you can do more things with a transition and a stage with workflow plugins, but also at that transition step where you're setting those workflow items up, also adding the information about the scheduler. So then whenever the workflow part of the scheduler fires, that next step moves on. So have you talked to Benjamin more on that particular project, Phil? Or I've been...
No, I've been using it quite a bit. That's what my talk in USA will be on Saturday. But and we use it in house. But no, I haven't. Because we set some up, if you remember, and then I spoke to Benjamin. He's like, "Well, it's not quite how it was intended." So I've done it more the way he intended, which is a little bit more. There's more steps, but I can see why it doesn't cause problems, whereas the other way the shortcut way could cause problems.
Phil and I are quite often Benjamin's nemesis, because Benjamin built something programmatically to meet a particular programming functionality requirement, and then Phil and I will tend to then take that feature and go and use it, and find that when you use it in a real world scenario, it might not always do what it needs to do. So I think between us, there's probably at least a dozen things that are still in the back of our minds that need to be turned into RFCs or bug reports.
Loads of stuff works really well until you actually use it.
Yeah. Which reminds me, someone sent me something today that is a new feature in 4.0 in regards to the global configuration, and you can now have a reply to field and a reply to name, but at the moment, even though you populate that, it doesn't get picked up by the email templates, so it doesn't set the reply to at the moment. So I'll look at that one later. So yeah. Cool. All right. So is that, if there's any other concepts or insights anybody's got questions on with those projects?
Like the rich snippets idea.
Yep.
If it's implements correctly.
Yeah, likewise. I've had to do that for a couple of clients in the past, and it's been a bit of a pain. So.
I do overrides for every website I roll out for Open Graph, and then for events and rich snippets for them. So that's great.
It sounds like we've got a test audience then.
For sure.
I'll have to mute off again. All my grandkids you can probably hear.
That's right. Right. Okay. In other news, that this time tomorrow, the next edition of the Joomla Community Magazine comes out at roughly 4 p.m. Australian time, which is a sign that I need to get back into the magazine mode again after a few months off. Is there anything exciting that you know is coming out in it, Phil? You're muted still.
The only one I've been involved in is Elisa and the crowd fest, winning the award, and that's to do with tough and signed packages. Joomla trying to get that implemented for all CMSs, and hopefully bringing that in probably 4.3, where you can have signed packages for all the extensions, which will improve security no end.
So that's validating their origin.
Yeah.
Cool. For those that weren't aware, Joomla won for the how many year in a row, Phil? The CMS Critic.
We won the most critics awards that we've won. So we had the publics for best open source and best free, but we also won the critics award for best open source. I think it was, yes. We've also won, although 10 people won it, another one on the 12th with another company that I didn't even know about. And the fourth one, we were leading until literally they decided to shut it and then count up. I don't quite know how we didn't come first, but we came second in that. So it's probably our best year so far, with the CloudFest as well.
At the start, I mentioned Phil's got a new job as of about 2 weeks ago. He's changed from being the marketing department coordinator to now being what's called the outreach department coordinator. So at the end of last year, Joomla merged effectively the better part of 3 departments, so marketing, programs and events, dropping 2 department coordinators and merging them to just be the outreach one. A few more specialised teams moved back into production, but the bulk of those 3 departments now fall under Phil's management.
Yes, I need to get an article out for the next magazine about plans for that, and the assistant to the outreach,
Again,
a very challenging individual. Sorry?
Somebody else didn't say no fast enough, did I? So,
yeah, that's right. At least we cover all time zones.
True. So I'm going to be Phil's assistant outreach department coordinator, which ideally, he's still able to attend all board meetings because they're at 3 a.m. Australian time for us. So, I'll be involved in behind the scenes on some of the admin tasks for across the. Is it 12 or 15 or 20 teams in the department?
Hundreds. Feels like it anyway. It's the important ones for magazine coming in, events. It's all kind of joined up. And behind the scenes, we've now got someone in events who wants to take on in marketing who wants to take on team lead for that, Louise. So, and that seems to suddenly becoming more active. So give it a month or two and we should see an improvement and more graphics and stuff going across the board, unification, making the job easier for events and magazine, and then hopefully that will free up people to do more articles and to do more stuff. We've also got some processes in the production of the images and stuff, which Tom from Holland has really helped with, which makes it so much quicker. So it's all good.
Nathan and Stuart and myself are also in the process of getting around to looking at the final things that we need to do with Linux Australia to formalise the new structure. So we'll be reporting back on that ideally next month. That will move us forward on that. And then, I don't know, it's April already, and I'm not sensing that a lot of people are still necessarily keen to travel interstate, especially after the carnage at the airports over Easter with too many people wanting to fly somewhere. We'll take a look at it again in another month or two, but I'm not predicting that we'll have an in-person conference at this stage, unless, Nathan, you're not that.
Why are you looking at me, mate?
We're not jumping into to committing to that yet. So, but hopefully,
with us two being from Melbourne, we're probably going to be least, enthusiastic out of everybody.
Yeah.
I would have thought. Before she gets shut down again.
No,
Probably. Yeah, I think maybe we should. Yes, start talking about it again. Probably.
Yeah, certainly. Yes.
Yeah.
Remind you to do a pub tour, just in advance.
Yeah, I think that's a given anyway. But yes,
Yeah, sure. You could come down. We could check out some venues. We can certainly organise that.
I don't know if interstate you're getting the same advertising as we get locally in Melbourne. There's apparently 20 to 30 rooftop bars that have opened up across the Melbourne skyline now. So we need to check out a few of those at some point.
That should be good to start with.
Then there's the ones along the river, and then there's the ones over near the exhibition centre and things like that. So yes, though I did hear yesterday that about 25% or 15% maybe of all liquor licensees in Melbourne haven't paid up their licence fees at the end of March. So there's either an exodus of about 1,000 licensed premises in Melbourne, or they're getting around to it still. So yeah.
I reckon they'll find the cash, Patrick. So.
Yeah. Yes. Understandably. So. Okay. Is there anything else? It's Anzac time of year again, so I've got accreditation issues coming across from Turkey at the moment, so I'll quickly go and sort those out before grabbing dinner. But thanks all for joining.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you. We've got a one this evening, in 12 hours' time, Joomla London, and we've got Scala hosting and someone who's totally blind, Julian, who's joined the accessibility team, although can't through Glip because it's not accessible, who's building websites with Joomla, and it's been a really interesting story. I've had to speak to him on the phone, and he's actually he tried WordPress and he tried Drupal, and tried Joomla, and has been building websites and viewing Joomla websites for the last few years. So he's going to be doing a talk on how he really likes Joomla and what we could do to improve it, because on Joomla 4 we broke something for him, but that's being fixed at the moment. But it's all been getting better and better. So a really, really encouraging story.
Is that 7 p.m. your time?
So that's 6 UTC, 7 British summertime.
Right. So that.
And Gary will record it, so it should be available within the decade.
So it's 4 a.m. for anybody on the east coast of Australia. So.
4 a.m. Yeah, on my way for the recording, but that sounds amazing. I would very much like to hear that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm setting my alarm. I don't know if I'll make it.
Don't worry. There will be a recording. It's just really nice. The guy contacted us and was so grateful for Joomla. I was like, oh no, thanks for joining the team and stuff. So yeah, really nice. He was a lorry driver until 12 years ago, and then just for a medical reason, lost his sight totally. So
glad it was in that order and not that he was a blind lorry driver. But
no, he's actually a motorbike rider, but that's his partner is usually on the front of it. But unfortunately, they had a big crash, nothing to do with sight. It was to do with the neighbour coming out of the drive, and so they're recovering from that still. So it doesn't sound like a great time, but no, the whole disability and accessibility side of it, Joomla is really doing well. I was really nice to hear someone's unbiased opinion where they tried all of them and said that only Joomla was the one we could use.
Should do a plug for next month for us. The plan is that Russell Searle is doing a presentation on the latest version of Virtumart with Joomla 4. So I think it's Virtumart 3. Is it 3, 4? I don't know.
3 point something.
Yeah, it's Virtumart and Joomla, so pick a version in between. And so he'll cover more on that, and we'll sort that one out with a bit more notice than the topic we dropped for tonight yesterday. So
Speaking about recording, Stuart, how did you go editing out the gate crashes in last month's presentation?
Still in progress, but I think I've got most of it out. So
It was fairly constant throughout, so I'm not sure how you've done that. But anyway, I look forward to having a watch.
Sounds like you should have left it in, or are we going to get 2 versions?
well, I always keep the original files just to be sure. So
Oh yeah, there's kind of the disco hacked version.
do a compilation TikTok of the outtakes, shall I?
Yeah, that sounds good.
I want the editor's cut. I wasn't here last month.
Right, I'm gonna go, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
That's
And
right.
next month, Brisbane will be back in the office and going to the pub afterwards.
But you're out of ISO, Stuart, unless you're back in ISO, of course.
All good.
yeah,
Sweet. See you guys.
all right.
Yeah,
See you
right.
soon.
Bye.